There is currently a code red constitutional crisis happening right now, and nobody is talking about it. A Democrat scheme over a decade in the making to permanently steal all future presidential elections is just a few signatures away from becoming reality. This week, Virginia became the latest state to join a pact that unconstitutionally subverts the Electoral College and only recognizes a national popular vote, fundamentally restructuring our form of government from a constitutional republic, as the founders intended, to what our founders feared the most and intentionally avoided: tyranny of the elite coastal cities. As always, like the video and subscribe to the channel. You guys won't want to miss this. But let's start by hearing exactly what this illegal Democrat alliance is.
In 1824, 1876, 1888, 2000, and now in 2016, the winner of the US presidential election lost the popular vote. Luckily for us, there is a way to get rid of the Electoral College, and it's called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. The way that the compact works is pretty simple. It's an agreement between the states to bind the electoral votes to the popular vote. The beauty is that it only takes into effect once there are enough states that have joined the compact. In other words, once 270 electoral votes out of 538 have been represented within the compact, these 270 votes will be forced to vote whichever way the popular vote goes, forcing the winner of the election to follow the popular vote. This will remove all power from the Electoral College and return it back to the voters.
So that video was from 2016, just to give you an idea of how long Democrats have been coordinating this seditious takeover. And the scariest part, ladies and gentlemen, as far as I can tell from researching this video, it's perfectly legal. Every state is allowed to allocate its electors however it chooses. But the assumption baked into that rule is states would never arbitrarily relinquish their sovereignty and would always, if not mostly, vote based on the interests of their population. When the founders were forming the republic, each state was its own separate country, and states maintaining a certain level of sovereignty was a primary concern in the formation of the Constitution. They could have never conceived the state of Virginia saying, we'll just vote however California and New York votes. But Virginia's governor just made that the reality.
Virginia has joined a national effort to get around the Electoral College. Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger signed a bill adding the Commonwealth to the National Popular Vote Compact. It's an agreement among states to award their presidential electoral votes to whichever candidate wins the national popular vote. With Virginia, a total of 18 states plus D.C. have joined the compact, totaling 222 electoral votes. The compact won't go into effect until enough states sign on to reach the required 270 votes to elect a president.
So now every vote cast in the Commonwealth of Virginia is effectively meaningless. All of Virginia's Electoral College votes now go to whoever the blue cities decide to vote for. Let's look at a map to see how many states are a part of this pact, because now that Virginia has officially signed on, we are inches away from this becoming the new presidential voting system. So every state in green has already joined this pact for a total of 209 electoral votes. Virginia just got added, which brings the total to 222. And as you see, North Carolina, South Carolina, Michigan, Kansas, Arizona, Nevada, and Alaska currently have active legislation to join this pact. And remember, all they need is 270 combined electoral votes for this to permanently override our system. Democrats are cramming this through because based on the 2030 census projections, the migration out of failed blue states into red states will give the Republicans a permanent electoral advantage, meaning in all future elections after 2030, the Democrats can carry the popular vote and will almost always lose electorally. But let's listen to a Democrat Virginia state senator explain why this is so morally necessary.
First of all, the Electoral College now has resulted in 5 different presidents being elected who did not win the popular vote. I think most Americans and most Virginians think they live in a democracy. But when it comes to the president, they actually don't. They live in a plutocracy because the founders chose to put this Electoral College system in between the voters and the election of a president. And I want to remind everybody, partly what motivated that at the time, not only was it a distrust of voters, not only was it a distrust of the masses, and by the way, I would just note that at the time the Electoral College got put in place, Most of the people sitting in this chamber probably wouldn't even be able to vote. Because if you weren't male and you didn't own 25 acres, you didn't have a vote when this thing got invented.
Democrats heavily rely on civil ignorance and appealing to emotional altruism to cram through their authoritarian agenda. We very explicitly do not live in a democracy, but Democrats vehemently regurgitate that blatant falsehood because democracy sounds fair and just, so how could you be against it? But you learn from that senator's explanation that he's not harmlessly ignorant about how our government works. He actually has contempt for how our government works. He doesn't want democracy because it's more equitable. He wants democracy for the exact same reason the founders didn't establish a democracy, because all elections will be determined by the major cities. And as of right now, the top 10 largest cities in America are all Democrat. He, like all Democrats, smugly believe they're the smartest, kindest, most enlightened human beings who have ever existed, and everyone who came before them was primitive, morally bankrupt, and vile. So all the systems and institutions they created need to be destroyed because they're inherently misogynistic and racist. They pretend the founding fathers were too stupid to conceive of pure democracy. Like while these guys were mulling over what kind of government to form, nobody proposed democracy because no one had the wisdom and insight of a gender studies major. But let's hear the Virginia state senator's other reason why we must abolish the Electoral College: slavery.
So I want to remind everybody that the other reason this got put in our Constitution was because at the time the Constitution was written, about a third of the people who lived in the South weren't considered humans. And at the time, when they wrote the Constitution, they put language in the Constitution that said that African Americans only counted as 3/5 of a person. 8 out of the 40 people in this room right now sit on this floor. And because of that language, it actually augmented the size of the congressional delegation of the South by about 42%. The only reason they agreed to the Constitution, including this state, by the way, is because of that language in the Constitution. And guess what that translated to when it comes to president? It translated into presidential power. The origins of the Electoral College, my friends, was to basically augment the power of the South because of slaves.
So the ultimate litmus test to determine if someone is an emotional thinker or a rational thinker is to ask them about the 3/5 compromise, the law that counted black slaves as 3/5 of a citizen in the census. An emotional person will say, "Oh my gosh, that's so immoral, it's inhumane. How could you ever count someone as 3/5 of a human being? The slaves obviously should have been counted as a whole person." Not even understanding supporting that sentiment would be to side and give more political power to the slave owners. The free states wanted slaves to not be counted at all in the census. They didn't want the massive population of slaves to be able to bolster the political power of the very people subjugating them. Any logical and truly compassionate person would conclude that slaves shouldn't be included in the census at all. If the slaves were counted as one person and not 3/5, the South would have probably been able to prevent the abolition of slavery. But the left only cares about performative kindness and being perceived as compassionate. So by proudly stating that slaves should have been counted as a whole person and not 3/5, you get applauded as a true humanitarian, even though the downstream effect of that would have been the permanent subjugation of black slaves. But I digress. Let's take a final look at the final election numbers between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump to see how all future elections will likely play out. So Kamala Harris lost the popular vote by about 2.3 million votes, but got handily beaten in the Electoral College. But if Democrats successfully change the way elections are conducted, this is how all future voting will go. The Democrat strategy will no longer be to win over moderates in swing states or to form any bipartisan consensus. The Democrat strategy will permanently shift to massively increasing voter turnout in heavy blue cities. Why spend the time trying to argue your case to swing voters that you actually have to convince with good policy when you can go to ideological strongholds with millions of people, campaign on emotional outrage and partisan propaganda, and simply convince more people in already favorable areas to come out and vote? If it becomes purely a numbers game, the Democrat Party has every incentive to allow every illegal alien in their borders to vote. They will pay homeless drug addicts on the street to vote. They can simply lie and promise free everything paid for by the evil rich people. If you increase voter turnout by 10 to 20% in Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, that makes up Kamala Harris's entire deficit. Our presidential elections stop becoming about getting the support of a wide array of varying interests and start becoming about metropolitan majoritarianism. And the worst part is voter turnout is notoriously low in deep blue states because most people already see the election results as a foregone conclusion. If the top 10 cities in America, which are all Democrat strongholds, see a 20% increase in voter turnout, it would be almost mathematically impossible for red states to compete. And the worst part about all of this is we know that if a Republican president somehow managed to win the popular vote, these Democrat states wouldn't stick to their agreement and allocate all of their electoral votes to that guy. They would quickly ignore and dispose their commitment and try to compete in the Electoral College. They're only going to enact this pact if the candidate that they want to win is leading in the popular vote. And all they need is a couple more states to join this pact for this nightmare situation to become reality. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Turn on those notification bells so you never miss a video. And I will see you guys in the next one.